Hello. Shall we start? Okay. As people will join in, we will keep on doing things as per necessary, but let's respect the timings and start off. So today it's my great pleasure to introduce you to SATHI. SATHI is acronym for Self-Reported Assessment and Tracking for Health Insights, and this is an open source application we have developed at Tata Medical Center as a revamped version of an electronic patient reported outcome measure which we have been using for the past 3 years. Now SATHI offers several new features and several advanced ways by which we can actually track patient reported outcome measures, and as we were discussing on the WhatsApp group, Sarthak said it may be useful to have a live demonstration of what it is. But before we go in, I would like to take some time to introduce what exactly are patient reported outcome measures so that the theory behind the process becomes more clear. So a patient reported outcome measure is anything that is reported by a patient, and many of you would have used patient reported outcome measures in your practice like quality of life measures and so on. But there are three defining characteristics which make up a patient reported outcome measure. The first, of course, that this measure needs to be self-reported. It cannot be reported by somebody else. Number two is that it needs to be defined, which means that the instrument or the method by which you are measuring this outcome needs to have a defined calculation methodology. And finally, it needs to have a validation which basically is used to make sure that the outcome being measured is actually validated in a specific scientific manner. So with this understanding, let us understand what is the difference between patient reported outcome measures and clinician reported outcome measures, because many of you would have this understanding that you can ask patients questions regarding their health and well-being, which you routinely do in clinical practice in the outpatient setting. But what is the key difference? The key difference is that a patient reported outcome measure is basically being a bottoms up approach where the patients themselves provide you with the response, and because patients provide you with the response, inter-rater variability and intra-rater variability is significantly minimized and reduced. Now this is not something that is new, this is something that is well known. There are multiple studies which have demonstrated that when clinicians report toxicities, for example, they tend to either under-report the toxicities or over-report the toxicities, and this is a concern with many of the studies where toxicity management has not been done using patient reported outcome measures. Most importantly, in patient reported outcome measures, because they follow a specific theoretical approach for their development, a method of standardization is possible, which is very difficult in case of clinician reported outcome measures. So why do we need to integrate patient reported outcome measures in practice? And when I mean in practice, it means that you are using these patient reported outcome measures in your routine day-to-day clinical encounters, no longer restricted to research settings where you are taking patient reported outcome measures as quality of life measures or symptom measures during the trial conduct and analyzing them at the end of the study. So this is not something that is unknown or not done. There are in fact 116 randomized controlled trials which were identified in 2021. Now I believe the number far exceeds 130. And in this meta-analysis, what they showed was that if you integrate patient reported outcome measures in routine clinical practice, you have better communication, patients have better quality of life. Some of the studies actually demonstrate that the disease control is better, and even the diagnostic ability is improved. So why SATHI? There are several electronic patient reported outcome measures which are available commercially. Some of you who are users of Varian may have heard of an application called Nuna, for example, which is designed for patient reported outcome measures. Now SATHI is designed with several key objectives, and one of the most important things that we wanted it to be was to be an open source system. Now, what is an open source thing? An open source software is not a free software. An open source software is a software where the source code is available for you to review, modify and change as necessary. And it has been seen in the software world that open source movement has resulted in tremendous advances in the way software is available for people. So the entire software stack is built using open source software, and the application itself is open sourced so that anyone can download it, use it and develop it further. It is free of cost to use and install, and of course you can basically liaise with your IT team to install and use. We would be happy to help you in this. It is multilingual, because one of the things that we realized was that many of the e-PROM systems which are developed in the West are restricted themselves to English and few European languages. So the project that we are using, the open source application called Django, is actually extensively multilingual and supports more than 70 major Indian languages. We also did not want ourselves to be restricted to a specific type of questionnaire. So many of you who have worked in the field of patient reported outcome measures know that there are variety of questionnaires that can be used, like the EORTC questionnaire, the FACT questionnaire, MD Anderson symptom inventory and others. Now all of these questionnaires are not only different, but they also measure different things. For example, if I take the example of the EORTC questionnaire, they are more concerned with the frequency and severity of the symptoms, while FACT questionnaires are often designed in a manner that they are interested in looking at the symptom interference with activities and daily life and the perception and impact of the symptom rather than the frequency of the symptom. So we did not want to restrict ourselves to a specific type of questionnaire, and therefore the system has been designed with that flexibility in mind. We also realized that in the coming years, patient reported outcome measures are no longer going to be something that are going to be restricted in the standard form based system, where you ask patients to respond to a set restricted responses like a Likert response. So we have the capability of supporting audio and video responses also from the patient, and I will demonstrate those to you how you work. We allow for longitudinal response display. What it means is that as a provider or a healthcare provider, you can actually see how the patient's health status changes over a period of time. And most importantly, and perhaps uniquely, we also offer something called as an aggregated response display. Now this is something that is probably present in very few software, where data of your patients is used to give you insights about how your patient is behaving. And finally, the software has been designed for integration with a routine clinical workflow, which means we want that it is to be used during the period of routine patient clinical encounters. Before I go further, let us take some time to understand the jargon, and then we will jump into the right demonstration things. So what do patient reported outcome measures do? They measure something called as latent rates. Now why the word latent? The word latent rate basically is because you cannot actually measure this thing. For example, pain, for example, functioning. These are not things that you can measure objectively on a scale. And in order to measure this so-called latent rate, we develop an artificial measure which is called as a construct. Now this construct is a theoretical thing, and there is a item response theory branch of science which has been designed to measure these things. Each of these constructs is measured using a scale, and each of these scales can be made up of one or more items, also known as questions, with defined responses. Confusingly perhaps, the responses are also measured using scales like a Likert scale. So taking a concrete example with many of which are familiar with, let's take an example of a blood pressure recording. Now this is an objective recording because you can actually see the blood pressure being measured on a sphygmomanometer. But if you apply the analogy, the blood pressure can be thought of as a construct that you are attempting to measure, and you are measuring it on a scale of millimeters of mercury using an item which is sphygmomanometer. So let us understand how that translates into a say physical functioning construct. So this is excerpt from the EORTC QLQ C30 questionnaire, where there are 5 questions which deal with their ability to do functions, physical functions on a day-to-day basis. Now as you can see that these 5 questions are not different. They are probably very similar to what you would ask in your routine clinical encounter, especially if you have some time. You would definitely ask these questions like whether they are having difficulty doing their work, whether they need to sit in the bed for a long period of time, how is their function, and so on. But you would not ask them in a standardized manner. And that inter-individual way of asking makes it very difficult for clinician reported outcome measures to be standardized. So here, using the EORTC QLQ C30, what is being measured, that is the construct, is actually physical functioning. And it is being measured using these 5 questions using a Likert scale. So a Likert scale is basically an ordinal scale where we are saying that if the patient responds not at all, that gets a value of 1. While if they respond very much, that gets a value of 4. Now this number 1, 2, 3 and 4 are arbitrary. They are designed based on the theoretical basis on which this questionnaire has been designed. So this can be 10, 20, 30, 40 also, for example, with absolutely no difference in the meaning. But the difference lies in the way these numbers are actually handled when this physical functioning is being calculated. So from the perspective of the individual items, the number 1, 2, 3 and 4 is essentially meaningless. What is meaningful for an item is the not at all statement, a little statement, quite a bit and very much statement. And the instrument which is being used to measure this physical functioning is called EORTC QLQ C30. Now each question, as you understand, is an item, and scores obtained from the Likert response are used to calculate the measure of physical functioning. Now the EORTC gives a formula which I would not delve into because each questionnaire has their own formula, and this formula is used to transform these individual scores into a physical functioning score. So something like a blood pressure measurement can be obtained for physical functioning, and that is the beauty of patient reported outcome measures, is that you can actually get an so-called objective measure of a subjective function. Now QLQ C30 of EORTC, and there are many other questionnaires, are so-called multi-dimensional patient reported outcome measure instruments. Why multi-dimensional? Because they are used to measure several things at once. For example, the QLQ C30 has 5 functional constructs that it measures, 9 symptom constructs and 1 global quality of life construct, measured using 30 questions. So you can understand that development of these patient reported outcome measures is a very involved thing, and it requires a lot of scientific basis in order to be done properly. But unfortunately what has happened is that until for the last say 10 years or 15 years, although the utility of these questions have been defined and established in multiple clinical trials, there has been very little push in integrating them into the routine clinical practice. So the key question is, what is the difference between an e-PROM system and something like a Google form? Now most of you have used Google Forms for developing surveys, questionnaires and so on and so forth. What is important to understand is that an e-PROM actually starts from the construct, not from the question. And this is why the e-PROM systems need to be designed in a different manner. Now if you know Google form, what you need to do is that you start by defining your questions. So in the e-PROM world you would call them to be items, but in case of an e-PROM system you would first start by defining the construct and then move on to the item. Now each item shares the Likert measurement scale. So again, this is important that here, for example, in physical functioning, all of the items are sharing this 4-point Likert scale. Now if you are doing this in Google form, you will have to replicate the scale individually for each question, which is redundant. So in e-PROM system, even the scales are defined differently. And most importantly, some of the scores may have composite scores. So let me take an example here. In these are the standard scores that you obtain from URTC QLQ C30. But there is an additional 15 item summary score also, which can be calculated by summing up and averaging the values of physical functioning, role functioning, emotional functioning, cognitive functioning, and these symptom domains except financial difficulties. So this is an example of a composite construct score. And again, if you want to do this in Google form, what you have to do is you have to ask the questions, get this data into a spreadsheet, feed this spreadsheet through a program which will then calculate these scores for you. And as you can understand, this would mean that you will have to define that program for each and every type of questionnaire that you use in Google form. So this is the primary motivation behind SATHI. And now with this, let us jump into the demonstration of how we create questionnaire in SATHI. Now I am starting with questionnaire rather than anything else because it helps to give you an idea about the concepts and how the concepts integrate in the system. So we will show you how to create a construct scale, how to create a common response scale, add items and select items for the questionnaire. So let's go ahead. And in between, if you have any questions or you feel that I need to slow down or re-explain something, please feel free to butt in and interrupt me. Let me just check the chat. No, nothing is there in the chat. Okay. So here is the SATHI application. This is what it looks like when it is installed at first. Don't bother about the URL. The URL is dependent upon where you install it. So this is a test bed that we have been using. And let me log out first of all so that you can all see this. So when you log out, this is what we show. And when we sign in, I will first of all sign in with an user account which allows me to create questionnaires. We take you to this questionnaire guidance page which gives you a step-by-step overview of how the questionnaire is to be created. We have already had a discussion on what these methods mean, so I will not read these things out but show you directly how to create a construct scale. So let us take an example of a construct scale like physical functioning which we defined for the URTC QLQ C30. So we start out defining the name of the construct scale, that is physical functioning, and the name of course will be URTC QLQ C30 questionnaire. I will call it demonstration because we will have several other of these done, and I will call it version 1. Now these are certain other additional things that we ask you to define or give you option to define. These are not required but you can define them. The first is what is the direction of this construct score. So if you specify that higher is better, that means if a patient receives a higher score or indicates that they have a higher functioning, that means they are better. Now this varies from questionnaire to questionnaire again. In some questionnaires, a higher score indicates a better outcome for the person. In others, a lower score indicates a better outcome. So we give you option to define this value. And where is this useful? This is useful when you are actually interpreting this as a clinician. We ask you to define the threshold score. Now what is a threshold score? A threshold score is a value of a score which you would expect to find in patients who are relatively healthy and disease free. If I am taking example of cancer for example, which can be considered as a chronic disease, you would probably want to get this threshold score among survivors who are living mostly without late effects. So say physical functioning has a threshold score of 65, which means if a cancer patient has survived after treatment and is relatively living his life without any major problem, you can expect a score of 65 in them. We also give you the opportunity to define a minimum important difference of the score. What is the minimum important difference? It is basically the difference between the two scores which defines whether the difference is meaningful or not. To understand this, let me take an example of blood pressure measurement. So suppose you have measured blood pressure in a patient 2 times. First day you measured it, it came out to be 120 millimeters mercury. and on the second day the systolic blood pressure came out to be 122 millimeters mercury. The difference is 2 millimeters mercury. Now this can be a simple measurement error and would not be considered as clinically significant difference. On the other hand, if the second day's measurement was 140 millimeters mercury, which means you directly got a 20 millimeter jump in the blood pressure, you would definitely repeat your recording because this is a significant difference and investigate this difference if required. That indicates there is a difference between the two measurements which is clinically meaningful. Similarly, for patient-reported outcome measures also, a minimum important difference between two score values can be defined. Now, in certain patient-reported outcome measures which have been extensively validated, there will be very good literature available for this. In others, there would not be. And when there is none, the recommendation generally is to take half of the population standard deviation as a minimum important difference. So let's say the minimum important difference is an 8-point difference, which means suppose the quality of functioning score changes from 60 to 69. That means the difference would be considered as clinically significant. Then you have something called as a normative score. Now what is the difference between threshold score and normative score? The threshold score is something that you define for patients. A normative score is the score which you get from normal population or normal humans. Now this seems a little counterintuitive. Why should we have these two scores? The reason is that not all patient reported outcome measures are meant exclusively for patients. Some, for example the URTC QLQ C30 can be used in normal individuals also, in healthy individuals, and it has been done to actually get a value which defines what is the population physical functioning score if, for example, the person is healthy. Now, how is this useful? In many of the quality of life measures, this value is actually used to understand how far the symptom or how poor or how bad the value is in your patient with respect to a normal population score. As you can understand, this would only be applicable for instruments which measure the quality of life or symptom burden in healthy individuals, not in specific disease populations. So for example, if you take the URTC HN43 or the FACT-B questionnaire, which is meant for breast cancer, and HN43 is meant for head neck cancer, you would want those not to have normative population scores because normal people will not have head neck cancer or breast cancer. So let's say we define this as 70 and the standard deviation of this mean, let's say it comes out to be 15. Now these are arbitrary values. You will get these values in literature, and once we click the construct scale, we have created the construct scale. So now I think this is the physical functioning questionnaire that we created. Now let's add an item to this question. So you see we are going in a slightly different manner. Let's call this PFQ1. This abbreviation is something that is not visible to the patient, but it is something that is useful when you are exporting the data of the questionnaire out of the system for further analysis in aggregate. How much rest did you need to take? Now this media item is something that you can use to actually record a voiceover or a video which supplements this question. Now typically if you look for patient reported outcome measures, they only define a text question, and in our practice you will often see that patients do not have that kind of literacy to actually read these questions. So this is another unique feature that we have provided in the system, that you can actually integrate voiceovers for these questions, so that people with limited literacy or say who have difficulty reading text can actually hear out or see the video of you speaking. I am not going to add a media, but I think we have a media questionnaire where I will show you this. This is an additional item which says that whether this is required for scoring or not. Now what do we mean by that? So whenever we have these 5 items, say 5 questions for physical functioning, some of these may be left blank by the patient when they are responding. Now patient reported outcome measures cannot be made as required question, which means you cannot say that you have to answer this question, because it's patient's individual perception and independence that matters. On the other hand, to calculate a construct score, you may need this answer to be given, without which the construct score itself will not be valid. So if you check this, it would indicate that the person has to add this question in order for them to get the answer. I will leave this blank for now. And now I can add the type of response. The usual response type is Likert scale, and for example here we have the URTC 4 response option, but I will show you what it looks like. So here we have the variety of Likert scales that are available, but you can add your own Likert scale. So here for example is an yes no Likert scale. So yes has a value of 1 and no has a value of 0. And you can see that each of these texts can be translated. So for example, not at all can be translated into the Bengali equivalent, and to do that you just need to do this. I will quickly do a Google Translate to show you. And I am doing this in Bengali, or let me do it in Hindi so that majority people can see, just to save some time in typing. Click on saved. So now you can see that the Hindi translation has appeared. Similarly, you can add the translation for the other text strings also. Most importantly, you can actually add media to this. So let me show you. So this is an example Likert scale that I am creating. Say for fact questionnaire. So fact typically starts with 1, which means, let me go to fact questionnaires, and if we go here we get say fact L. All of them are same more or less. Measures, general measures, fact G, and I am downloading the measure. So you can see here the Likert scale is different. 0 is not at all, a little bit is 1, somewhat 2, quite a bit 3, and very much 4. What you would understand is for all of these questions, the Likert scale is same. You don't want to really type it out every time. So what you can do is that you can go back here. So option value will become 0. Let's put it not at all. You also allow you to add smileys. Okay, this is not required, not recommended. It would be probably something that I would investigate at a later stage whether it actually helps with the evaluation or not, but it can be done. And similarly, you can add a voice for this, which actually reads out what this is, and this can also be translated. So let me add the next statement little bit, quite a bit, somewhat. Very much. So here I have created a fact Likert scale. In this way you can create your Likert scale for your this thing, and I will also show you what is a range scale like. So for example, if you have VAS scale like pain scales for example, you can use a VAS scale. So here we have a VAS scale which ranges between 1 to 10 with an increment of 1, where 1 means no pain, 0 and 10 means severe pain, and so on. Now nonetheless, let's keep on going. Let's keep on the URTC4 option. I can choose to leave this as missing or not. And here also, for items also, I can define what is the direction of improvement. So if you see that questionnaire, it means that the lower is actually better. So let's say that the patient will have perfect physical functioning when they have an item value of 1, because not at all means 1. So we'll call it 1, which means anything above 1 will be considered as an indicator of less function. These can be specified in the questionnaire or not specified, but for now let us just leave it at that, and I will click this thing so that I get it. So again, you can see here what you are seeing is 25 different items that we have created. Now these items are actually questions, and now you want to add them to a questionnaire. So how do you go about it? You go to the questionnaire section, you create a new questionnaire, say example demonstration questionnaire. You can define the days over which the patient can answer these questions. So for example, if you want that the patient should not answer this question faster than say 3 days, which means they should not be able to answer it in the second day or the next day or within 30 minutes after their last response, you can enter 7 here, give a day value. If you have multiple questionnaires, then you can define an order in which these questionnaires will be displayed, and you can put a value over here and it will automatically show this. And the questionnaire redirect will actually redirect the question or the responder to the next questionnaire if this is specified. Again, this is up to you or not. So you can now add questions because we had done this. Let me add this question. So you can see I have added this question. And I can add questions from other things also. For example, I have got a questionnaire with 3 questions. I will not create this questionnaire because this is a meaningless questionnaire. But we have questionnaires that are created which I will show you. So for example, we have a pro use questionnaire which I will now show. So this is the pro use questionnaire which basically asks these questions. These are a sample of the questions which have been taken from the URTC QLQ C30, and you can see that each of them are using the URTC 4 response option, and they are given in a particular order as per this thing. The construct that they are measuring is mentioned over here. What is also important is that you can translate the question text. So for example, if I click over here, this is the English language that the patient will be seeing. This is a test questionnaire developed from 5 scales. So let me quickly translate and show it to you. Now, of course, you would be doing a much better job at translating when you are actually doing it. Also, it is important to note that your language choice over here in this system, we have configured 2 languages, Bengali and Hindi, but you are not limited to them. So for example, if you configure the Kannada language, it will come over here. You won't have to do anything specific for it. It means that it will automatically show you all the languages that you have configured. Now of course, you wouldn't want this list to be filled with 100 languages. You would want them to be restricted to the patient profile that you are doing. So if you click on save translation, the translation for this is saved, and I will quickly show you how this translation appears. Let me switch back to Hindi, and you can see that this translation which I just pasted in has appeared, and this is what the patient will also see. So aside from this, we also give you the ability to add rules to display question. So for example, let me go to this. I will change back to English so that everybody could quickly see it. And I can now manage rules. So what are rules? Rules are used to define which question would be visible if response is given. So for example, suppose a person has got a full ability to do strenuous activity and long walk, etc. You probably don't want them to ask the question about short walk. Now, this may or may not be recommended, but this is given as a feature. So suppose you say that people will be asked to answer this question only if somebody says they have trouble doing long walk. So I can click on manage rule, click on add rule. So it will automatically show the question by order. So suppose this is the third question. It does not show you the remaining 7 questions in the list. It will only show you the first 2 questions, because of course you can answer based on those first 2 questions. So do you have trouble taking the long walk? You will say that it is greater than 1. Only then you will be asking or displaying this question, and we will see how this looks like. So here, if the person says that they have trouble taking a long walk and the response they provide is greater than 1 or not at all, that means the second question, that is trouble taking short walk, will be shown. Okay. So this is also called as conditional display or conditional logic in many of the questionnaires designing systems that you would have seen, like SurveyMonkey, Redcap, etc. So this is there. This more or less covers the questionnaire part, and let us take a look at the next section, which is going to be on equations. So why did we need an equation system? Okay, this is another unique thing this system has. That is, we have actually designed a complete equation editor in this system, which allows you to integrate a validated equation into the system. Now this was necessary because every PROM instrument has a different method for calculating the construct scores, and I will show you some examples. So a dedicated equation editor is necessary because we are not restricting ourselves to a particular type of patient reported outcome measure. We support a variety of mathematical operators and assignment operators, and this has been validated. Validation has been done using a dedicated LARC parser. This is a piece of software which allows us to create a mini language. So a mini language has been created in this system, which actually allows us to validate the equation to make sure people are not putting in malicious equations. So let's take a look at how this works out. So to add equations, we need to go back to the construct scales. So for example, here I will show you how the equation editor works. So this is an EORTC emotional functioning questionnaire, which has 4 questions associated with it. And what we need to do is that we need to specify this equation. And what Q1 is the placeholder for question number 1. So we have specified that unless somebody specifies that Q1 with these curly braces is specified, the text will be considered as invalid. So this is a formula that is taken from the URTC QLQ C30. If you go back to this slide, I will show you. So over here you can see the equation. So the functional scores, this is the equation that is followed. Range is basically what? The difference between the maximum and minimum value for the Likert response. So 1 to 4, range will be 3. So this is exactly what we have put over here. So it is the sum of 4 questions divided by 4 to get the average value. Subtract this value, subtract 1 from this value, divide by 3, subtract this value, reverse it by subtracting from 1 and multiply 100. So this is the whole funda. Now for each different types you can specify a different one. So let me add this one, for example fatigue. So fatigue, for example, has a single question. So if I click over here, it will automatically add this question over here, and I can see the variety of options which are available for me or which support it. So for example, I can say that multiply, say A is equal to question 1 into 34, just giving you an example, which means the first step of the equation is that it will multiply the value of question 1 with 34, and then B is equal to A divided by 23. So this will return the value of B. So of course this could have been done in a single manner, but I just wanted to show you. Most importantly, we can also use if-else clauses. Now where is this useful? Let's take an example at another important questionnaire called the Pro-CTCAE questionnaire. So the pro CTCAE questionnaire, all of you know about CTCAE, common terminology criteria for adverse events, right? So pro CTCAE actually is a patient reported outcome measure version of the CTCAE. This is what it looks like. So you can see that, for example, for dry mouth they are asking what is the severity of your dry mouth at best, none, mild, moderate, severe or very severe. Now for pro CTCAE they don't ascribe a numerical value to this directly. They have a very specific type of scoring mechanism, which is a very complicated mechanism using a grading algorithm, and I will show you what this algorithm looks like. So this is what the algorithm looks like. So suppose you have a frequency related question where you are asking how frequent it is. Then you have a severity related question, and then you have interference related questionnaire. So here, for example, dry mouth is asking a question related with only one dimension, that is severity. Mouth source has two dimensions, severity and interference. I think all of you can see. If you go back to the very appendix of this grading scheme, and this is how you get the composite grade. So suppose your frequency is 0, severity is 0, interference is 0, then the composite grade, which is similar to the CTCAE grade you ascribe to the patient's toxicity, is 0. So you can see this is not a plus minus average business at all. This is an if-else business, and this is also supported by our equation editor, like this. So in this way, our equation editor actually allows you to define complex ways to calculate the construct scores. Okay, so this is the questionnaire part. Let me see. Does anybody have any questions so far about what we have said? And then I will take you to the patients part, how patients are registered, how patients respond, and so on.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, Sarthak here.
Yes, please, Sarthak, tell me.
Sir, it is very interesting for me because in my in PG career, I have done all these calculations manually, and whatever scales has been derived from mild, moderate, severe scales, whatever you told, and it has been all I have done manually. So my question is, how the patient will fit the data?
Okay, so that is what we are coming to now.
Okay.
So how does patient fit the data, right? But I think, is there any question related to what I have shown till now? Any doubts, anything that was not clear before I go further?
Sir, I will tell later on.
Okay, perfect. And if anybody has, please go ahead and speak, because we only have around 18 people, so there is no problem. Okay, let's go ahead then. So the next part is, before the patient actually fills in anything, you need to register them, right? You need to register them in the system, and why do you need to register them in the system is also a question. The reason is, you need to make sure that the responses that are given are that of the patient only. If you allow anonymous responses, yes, Sarthak?
Sorry?
You said something in between. Okay, so
No sir.
okay, so the reason is that if you allow anonymous submissions, you have absolutely no way of understanding whether the patient has actually filled this in or somebody else has. So because this is something that you would want to use in clinic, you would want to have a sort of audit trail. Therefore, a patient registration system is important. So there is a very simplified way of registering patients. This is not an electronic medical records by any means. We just require a few details, and patient registration can also be done by authorized personnel. So for example, you can actually have a person who is designated to register patients, who will not be able to see the responses of the patient or design questionnaires and so on. We also allow you to tag people to particular institutes or departments. How is that helpful? So suppose you have installed this in your hospital. You probably want to see patients who are enrolled in your department and not the department of endocrinology, for example. So if you define the departments, we have the institute column, but you can use that as a department. You can then restrict the patients to particular department itself, and that helps because the person who is reviewing the responses will be only able to see the filtered list that is available for them. We also allow you to add details like diagnosis and treatment flexibly, and these are also useful when you are actually reviewing the patient responses. So for example, now let's go back and add a particular patient. I am going to use the admin account to add the patient. So if I go to patients, I click on add patient. I need to ascribe a username to them. So patient demo 2, give her this thing, put a password. Add the patient ID. Say this is test ID 1, 2, 3. Say this is Johnny Storm, 23, male. So here I have two institutes, for example, but you can easily keep these institutes as departments, which means you have department of radiation oncology, department of endocrinology, department of surgery, and so on in this list, and you can restrict them to particular departments. Let's say I have registered them in Tata Medical Center, put their date of registration as something. Now why is this important? Because it helps, I will show you when the patient response is coming, how you see them. This is where it becomes useful, and you can choose the patient's preferred language. So the moment you choose this, automatically the system will demonstrate these responses to the patient using their preferred language. So let's say I choose Hindi for this, and I then allocate them to the patient group. I click on create patient. The demo 2 patient has been created. I need to do something else here before the patient can be actually logging in. I need to first of all assign questionnaires to them. So say I want to give them the Pro CTCAE questionnaire to answer, and just to demonstrate, I will also give them a media questionnaire to answer. And after that, I need to do something in the backend because that email was invalid, is to basically go back and add this email. So the patient was, let me see, what was the name of the patient? Patient demo 2, yes. And I forgot the email address that I used. Patient demo 2, yeah, let's use this email address. Now this is not something that you have to do if you are using a valid email ID, because it will automatically send a validation mail to that specific email ID to validate that email when logging in. But because this is a dummy mail, I cannot use that email. So now let us use incognito window to actually see how this looks like. So here I am going to log in as that patient which I just created. What was the name? Yeah, patient demo 2, and sign in. So you see automatically it is now showing the interface in Hindi. I didn't have to change the language, I didn't have to switch anything. Now the patient is going to answer the questions. Please remember, now I am pretending to be the patient. So what it is showing? It is showing two questionnaires. Now here the answer questionnaire button is, text is not translated, but once it is translated it will show in Hindi also. You can see here the Hindi text is showing. Let me first answer the question for the pro use, and then I will take the media questionnaire. So the patient starts to answer the question. So they see the question and the responses. So bilkul nahi we actually had translated in Hindi, that's why it is coming. The rest are coming in English because we haven't translated these strings. So let's say little bit, let's say all. So what you can see also is that the moment the person is clicking this answer, it is automatically navigating to the second question. There are two key design elements here. First of all, we are restricting only a single question in a single shot. Why is this important? Because we don't want to give an extra cognitive overload on the patient. The patient needs to see only one single question. The buttons have to be large so that anybody can see them nicely, and because we are automatically moving to the next question, they don't have to click on that next question button. That saves clicks. Now most of the time your patient will be filling this up in their mobile and tablet. So let's see how it looks on a mobile. So I will make this smaller. So in a mobile phone, this is how the interface will appear, and you can of course tap it to go to the next one. So in this way you keep on going. Now if you had added some media to this question, you would see this. Okay. Now let me just go back to the previous question. Remember we added a logic in the second step. Let's say I don't have trouble taking long walk. It will automatically skip to question number 4 instead of showing you the question number 3. Let me go back and I choose quite a bit. Now it is showing question number 3. So this is how the jump logic works, or the redirection logic will work. Nonetheless, let's quickly move on. So once the patient has submitted the response, this response has been submitted. Sarthak, have I been able to answer the question of how the patient will be able to see the questions?
Yes sir, yes sir. It is very easy for the patient. I just want to ask you whether the patient is going to give the answers at his leisure time or at the OPD or at
that is up to you to decide. Technically speaking, this is an application which is available on the web, so they can do it sitting at home also. But I will tell you some practical difficulties we faced, because we are running a study using telemedicine and prompts, and we have some initial insights on that, which I will be sharing at the end of the presentation. So this is the second media questionnaire. Yes, please tell.
It is a web-based application.
It's a web-based application. No, this is not an application that you install on your mobile or anything like that.
Okay.
Now, I told you that you could also ask people to give a media response. Right, how does that work out? Let's answer this media questionnaire. So here we are asking the question, please describe the pain that you are experiencing, but I want to record a video. I am having lots of pain. Okay, done. Now we also provide patients with a patient portal, which can be accessed over here. So the moment they go there, they will be able to see all the responses that they have provided, and in addition to that, how the responses have been. Now these are, the person has answered only one time, which is why you are seeing only one, but I will show you some other patients' responses also, which so that you can understand. And here is what the thing. I am having lots of pain. So in this way you can actually record an audio or video of the patient also. Now it's up to you whether you want to do it or not, and this is not a validated patient reported outcome measure because videos cannot be validated mathematically, but nonetheless this feature is available for you. And in the future we want to introduce AI assisted transcriptions from these videos and so on. Okay, so I will now log out. and log in as another patient. Let me log in as patient B1. I think should be okay. That's a patient H5 then. This is what happens if I don't validate my email ID, which is why I had to do that particular step before. Okay, so these are all security measures actually. So let's go back to the presentation once. Yes, Vishnu, please go ahead with your question.
Is there any other way to validate, because some of the patients are quite wrong, they do not have email address, they not IPs, so.
Unfortunately, not at this moment. But technically speaking, software wise it is possible to integrate things like OTP, biometrics, etc.
Does it allow us to just keep this patient is kept in an environment where
No.
we can ensure that the way?
No. There is a good reason for that, because this patient portal otherwise would not be possible. This patient portal otherwise will not be secure. Okay, I have already shown you about the multi-language support. Now, and I have already showed you the response types also, and how the patients respond. Now let us see how doctors view the response. Okay, so in order to do that, I will log in as a doctor. Okay, the moment I log in as a doctor, you will see that my interface has changed. I'm now seeing the link for the healthcare provider interface. Now this healthcare provider is associated with Tata Medical Center, which is why they are able to see the Tata Medical Center patients only. They cannot see the other patients. You can of course search by the name over here, filter the list and so on, and you can see the genders, questionnaires, diagnosis, etc. Now if you view patients, you can actually see what this patient has. So this patient, for example, is a 35-year-old female. Of course it is a simulated patient, so there is no problem me showing all of these things, and has completed adjuvant radiotherapy, adjuvant chemotherapy and surgery. Now surgery was delivered between 15th of February and adjuvant chemo between March 14th to July 18th, adjuvant radiotherapy from August 29 to September 19th, and the patient themselves were registered somewhere in February with a diagnosis also done in February. I am showing these dates for a very specific reason, which I will show you now. In order to view the patient reported outcome measure responses, you can click over here, and what it will do is that it will show you all the pro data that the patient has responded to. What it is showing you first is all the constructs that have been calculated. So mind you, let's go back to the beginning of the presentation where I said constructs are the first class citizen of patient reported outcome measures, and here this questionnaire measures pain, physical functioning, fatigue and emotional functioning, and therefore in this questionnaire you can see that all of these are being shown in this section called top line results. I will also show you another patient response where they are not in the top line results and what that means. But top line results typically are constructs which need attention, and why they need attention is shown over here. So here you can see there is a plot which shows the last 5 responses of the patient, and just to help you see this plot in a better manner, let me zoom it in. So if I hover over here, I can also show you what is the week at which the patient has submitted the response. So you can see this patient has submitted this response on 14th of March, which was 6.2 weeks after the date of registration. So by default it shows you the date of registration, and by default it shows the last 5 responses, but we can show more than that. Let's go to the filter section at the top, and instead of 5 submissions, let me make it all submissions. Now the moment we do that, what happens is that now you can see all the responses. Can you see? The line curve has changed. What other things are visible? You can see this dashed orange line. This is the threshold score, and this blue line is the normative score, which we defined at the very beginning. That the bar or the this bar, which is in light opacity color, is the standard deviation around the normative score. If you hover over each of these, you will get to see what the patient's response is. And here we also provide you a text summary that the pain score is 83.3 today. This is the last assessment. This is again designed with clinics in mind. So you of course will want to see the response that the patient has provided latest, right? So the last response, that is this one, is the one that is going to be told about. So here the pain score is 83.3 and it has remained stable as compared to the last assessment. It has not clinically worsened as compared to the MID. So this is where the minimum important difference comes in. It helps you to decide whether this difference between the two scores is more than the MID. Again, here the score is stable, so that question doesn't appear. It is comparing with the threshold value as well as the normative score and telling you why this is worse or good. It also shows you a comparative population score. Now here the comparative population score is not seen because it is being overlapped with this plot, but we will showing you other plots. The comparative population score of 7 patients, 7 other patients, is 83.3 at this time, with an interquartile range ranging between 41.7 to 88.3. And for pain, there are 2 items. These are the 2 questions that were asked for the pain. Whether the patient had pain and did the pain interfere with activities of daily living. And it says that all of these 2 items have remained stable since the last assessment. You can see the individual patient response to the questions also in the same. Let's go to the physical functioning. And as I was showing you, physical functioning actually shows you this difference. So this dotted line, which previously was hiding behind the previous plot, is the aggregated score of the patients in the system. This is a very different and unique thing. So what happens is the normative score, threshold scores are all scores obtained from studies done in patients in literature, and they may not actually match your patient population in practice. This actually allows you to get a clearer understanding of what your patient is doing with respect to other patients who have had the same treatment, same diagnosis at this time point. So this is important. Why? Because here you can see that the x-axis is defined with respect to time in weeks. It's not dates. Why not dates? Because every patient will not respond to the questionnaire on the same date. But you want to know, say at 20 weeks, out of the 50 patients of head neck cancer that you had, what was the average patient reported outcome measure, say 3 weeks after surgery. If you want to know that question's answer, you can click here. So I say after radiotherapy, this patient's radiotherapy ended at 19th of September. And the moment I do that, it will show you a plot which shows this is the time point at which the patient's surgery was done. And at this point, say after this point, this time, the average physical functioning or median physical functioning score of the patients in your system other than this patient is 80 points. Is this visible? So in this way you can see the different patient reported outcome measures. There are other filters also. So for example, if I say you filter the results from the date of surgery of carcinoma breast, what does that mean? It means that it will filter the results for patients with carcinoma breast only, not for patients with head neck cancer. If I do this, you will see that my date will change in the x-axis. So in this way the system actually allows you to do, you can also choose different forms of aggregation. For example, you can choose mean with 95% confidence intervals. The plot will change. This is the mean score now with 95% confidence interval mean instead of median with interquartile range. Now median with interquartile range is generally the recommended one, because whenever you are talking about patient reported outcome measure data, you probably would want to have a non-parametric statistic rather than a parametric statistic. So that is there. There are other things also, like for example you can filter with the patient. For example, if I say match patient, then automatically what it will do is that it will filter out the results of the questionnaire to show only patients with breast cancer. So this is how the patient's responses can be seen, and let us see Johnny Storm's responses, which we just did some time ago. No, not Johnny Storm, sorry, that was a different patient. What was the name? Anyway, I can show you this patient's responses, for example. Here also it is like that. Let me see this patient. Yes, here for example you can see the top line results are only having 3 constructs: pain, fatigue and emotional functioning, but physical functioning is in the other construct score. Why is that? Because this score is actually better than the threshold. This is actually better functioning than the patient population that is there. So what it does, what this system does is that it highlights the important constructs on the top and then shows the other constructs at the bottom, so that during your clinical encounter you focus on the key constructs and the items that matter. Any questions so far? Yes, Vishnu, please ask.
So does it show all the patients in a snapshot taken of like actioning upon someone who is worsening?
Well, if you see the aggregated one, it will show you the aggregated scores are from the other patient's data, but it will not show you the actual values of those aggregated data. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, so I didn't know. I think you understood my question, but the purpose was like to like streamline patients who should be reviewed by a doctor or by a auxiliary health professional. So
yes, so for example if you want to do that, you will then have to decide on setting up rules, which means like for example if I go back to that, suppose that patient's outcome, let's go back. So let's say fatigue, right? Here what it is showing is that the fatigue score is 88.9 and the comparative population score at that time is 66.7. Now what your question was, suppose it is more than 20 points more than the population average at the same time, because this is the same time point for the other patients also. Do you understand what I am saying? Which means other patients who have responded at 32 weeks, their score is being shown. Is this clear?
yes, sir.
Okay. So now you can say, or you can set up these rules. Currently the system doesn't have automatic triaging or anything like that, but you can set up an internal rule which says that, or a manual rule which says that, okay, if the score difference between these two is anything between more than this, then please submit it. And we can of course set up a rules module later on, with actions and things like that, or a decision support system later on. As I mentioned, this is an open source system, so it is infinitely extensible. Okay. So now, any other questions? Yes, please.
So how to present the normative or threshold scale or index scale? How is it different for all questionnaire or is it different for all?
It is different for all questionnaires. It is defined from literature, Sarthak. You cannot define it on your own. So typically for URTC, for example, there are publications which help you to get these values.
Okay. So for URTC it is different, for FRAC it is different.
Yes,
for
yes.
others
It is different, which is why we have to make these accommodations. Now if we had designed the system only for URTC, the system would have been infinitely more simpler. Because all of these things which you are saying that you have to specify can be automatically got in, so as to speak. Jyoti, please ask.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I have a question like this you said it some minutes before on Dr. Vishnu's issue. That suppose he has set some rules. Now the health provider, like I am checking that these are the responses. But in between, like in a week, I haven't checked. Can I get an alert on some patients? Like this patient is worsening.
That is a very good point and a suggestion. Now I have not integrated this as of yet, because there are how should I put it, medical legal concerns. When at a software level, that alert business is pretty easy. But the problem is with, suppose you raise an alert, right? Then who is responsible for responding to that alert becomes a question. And what happens if that patient does not respond to that alert is also an important question. So this is not a software development challenge. The alert system is actually pretty easy to develop. It is more of an implementation challenge, and whether you actually want it or not.
So that if the patient is worsening, they are able to contact, you can call that patient.
Yes, certainly those things can be easily integrated into this, because the moment the patient responds, the score is actually calculated. So if the score is being calculated, the software backend can also easily calculate whether the aggregated score is worse than the normal or not, and then set up a reminder, notification, alert, whatever you call it. All of these are possible. Currently not there, and I don't think I will make it available as a routine feature with the software, but probably going to be an optional plugin or something like that, because different healthcare systems will have different requirements, right? Some of the systems may have the capability to respond to these responses, some of them may not. Practically, for example, if a patient say responds at 2 o'clock in the night, it is possible for them to respond. Then who is going to respond at 2 o'clock in the night is going to be a question then. Okay. Anything else? Okay.
Sir, how to suppose patient? Sir, can I?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
All the things has been done. Patient reported his data and everything has been done. So apart from we know the curve, what other things it is going to, how to interpret in a different way, means like we get local control, survival and all these things kind of data. This is separate, but this is quality of life. What other things can we interpret from the data?
Okay, so the first thing that you can interpret from the data is the fact that you actually get a multidimensional overview of the patient. You are no longer restricted to a single symptom. You can also look at, means this is just an example questionnaire, right? If you actually do a quality of life questionnaire, even C30 will give you 30 constructs. So each of these constructs you can take a look at, and then it will be able to tell you which constructs need specific attention. That in itself is important. Now what you are saying about, say there are 10 top line results constructs. What you should pay attention to is something that we cannot let the system decide, because as I mentioned, it is not specific for a type of questionnaire. If this was say type of questionnaire like say URTC QLQ, I support only URTC questionnaire, then setting up a type of response would have been easier. But because you may want to choose a patient experience measure also, right? You may want to know how satisfied the patient is with your hospital, whether the bathrooms are clean or not, whether something like that. Now, do you want action on that? Is also going to be a question. So that system also will probably need a lot more thought. Let me put it this way. It's not something that can be integrated trivially, because if you just put an AI to do it, it is definitely going to make your life worse than better for sure. Jyoti, go ahead, please. Jyoti, you have a question? Another question? Okay, excellent. Anybody else? Yes, Rahul, please go ahead.
Good morning. Hello.
Yes. Please proceed.
Yes, sir. I just want to ask a question. I'm actually very oncology. I very oncology before. So I just want to ask, like, how it is useful for me as a, let's say, I'm a senior resident. So how it is useful for me, and how it is useful for department as well, and how it is useful as a hospital where
Okay.
I'm working, and how on a whole how it is useful for our health system.
Okay, that's a good question actually. So let me take the first part. How is it useful to you? So traditionally we know from the evidence which already exists that if you integrate these kind of patient reported outcome measures in your routine clinical practice, you can pick up symptomatic deterioration in your patients faster. Patients who have these kind of quality life assessments done tend to have better quality of life assessment. In fact, there is a randomized control trial by Ethan Dash. If you have some time, you can go back and search in the literature for that, which has been done in USA, of course, where they have done an integrated symptom monitoring for patients who are undergoing systemic therapy, and they had demonstrated that patients who had this kind of symptom monitoring done tended to have much better quality of life, fewer emergency visits, and also, most importantly, in a phase 2 result, they also showed a signal for improved survival. So this is not something that is just for collecting patient data. We also know from the existing literature that there is definite improvement in patient provider communication if these kind of systems are integrated into practice. What happens is, when you are sitting in a busy outpatient clinic, you probably have very little time to explore all the patient's issues. If you have this kind of system in hand, you can quickly focus on the issues which matter to the patient. So from your perspective, there is another very interesting thing that comes up in India particularly, which I think is very useful, is that if you are practicing in an area where you are not the native language speaker, then getting all the questions asked from the patient is very difficult without a proper translator, and most of us don't have the luxury of having translators with every patient interaction. So there again, having a patient reported outcome measure with the patient answers in their language and you see in your language, I think is extremely useful. I think you also understood how this can be useful for your department and a hospital level also, right?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Pramod?
Hello, Santam sir?
Yes, please.
Pramod Gupta here.
Yes.
As usual, very informative and comprehensive explained by you, sir. I have a couple of questions. Like
Sure.
like our center, around 85% of patients will not be having email. Although they have Android phone. So for when you are starting Android phone, the shopkeeper itself enters some Gmail ID.
Yes.
But practically,
No one has their own email ID.
yeah, so you are thinking to have a tablet. So what is solution you are offering so that...
So there is no problem. See, the email ID is necessary for you to register.
Okay.
So what we have done in the past using our e-PROM system is because you had the same issue, like the patients don't have email ID, right?
Yeah.
So what we used to do is we used to give them a dummy email ID and a password.
Okay.
And we just used to go back in the admin and like make it validated. What we also used to do was make sure that the patients actually knew that password and the login. Otherwise it becomes difficult.
Okay. And
The problem is with if they forget the password. Recovering the password becomes very difficult and challenging.
Okay.
Because the password recovery mails get sent to the email. So if you set up a dummy mail, then they will not get it. Another option that is available from you as an institute level, that may not be practical feasibly, but to be considered maybe in Indian setting is to give an institute level email ID
Okay.
to the
And
patient.
sir, what is the difference between this SATHI and Pro use?
They same. I've just rebranded the name to Sathi because I thought pro use is something that people will not be able to understand. Sathi is a common Hindi term, Indian word.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, sir. Okay, sir. Look,
Pro use is the name of the study where we are evaluating the, what do you call it, the usability of the system.
sure, sir.
Yes, Rahul. I think Sarthak is, let me open the queue, otherwise it is difficult to understand. Yes.
One thing, another question, sir.
Yes, please.
Suppose we are seeing for one patient, the curve is like this, and how pain score is worsening or improving. How can it be summation of 100 patients? If I see data of suppose prostate patients for 5 years, if all the patient reported data has been already
Captured.
done by the patients, how can I interpret for 5 years of data if all patients?
So what will happen, Sarthak, is that this dotted line that you can see now,
Yes.
this is the responses of those remaining patients, excluding this particular one. So this is automatically calculated by the system, and it will automatically calculate every time a new patient comes in. So when the 101 patient comes in, it will automatically calculate for 101.
So it is not required for separate thing. It is going simultaneously.
Yes, this actually calculates based on the data at the back end.
Okay. So
This is not manually fed data.
My patients.
Yes, of course, your patients in your system.
Okay.
That is the utility, na? Means, see, what happens is, our patients often have vastly different nutritional functional profiles as compared to Western patients, right? And this is something that we have loads of data of. So baseline data, for example, means this is something that I have actually got a publication on, where we did this study in TMH, when I was in TMH, where we actually saw the baseline quality of life scores for the URTC QLQ30 and LC13 for lung cancer patients. And we found that the baseline data does not match with the baseline data that is provided by URTC. It's very simple that our patients tend to have much greater functional deficits as compared to them, but they do much better socially as compared to them. So it makes sense to actually correlate with your patient data, and where you are practicing, your patient profile will be different from where I am practicing and my patient profile.
Right.
So this system actually, wherever is going, this calculation, this thing is going to calculate dynamically based on your patient data. This is not hard coded data anywhere. It will change after 3 months. This curve will change. What will happen is that as the number of patients evolve, these error bars will become smaller and smaller.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Right.
Yes, Dr. Pramod, you had another question? Yes, Sarthak, please go ahead. Sarthak, any questions? Dr. Pramod, any question?
No, sir. No, sir.
I know already asked.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions from anyone?
So, I'm planning to, what I'm planning to discuss next time.
Okay, so the next steps are very simple. I just wanted to show you, we actually have now received the certain security certificate for this, which is useful. Now this is, we actually took into a lot of factors into account, like we have implemented, for example, 2-factor authentication. Now, if you have a patient population which does not have an email, these authentication measures make no sense, but it is possible to do. And we are open for collaboration. Now Chavi is an open source system. Sathi is developed under part of Chavi, and we are really interested in getting collaborators who will be willing to use this in their healthcare system. Now we have not designed Sathi as a monolithic central server installation where all patients' data will come in. We want you guys to actually go back to the IT team in your place and see whether you can integrate this in your healthcare system. And if any help is required, we would be happy to do that. Because this uses a very standard software system, it requires a server, and that server administration is little bit is required, but it is not onerous. It is not a very what do you call it, a very challenging task. We would be very happy if some interface language translations can be provided, so that we can have these languages translated, the interface translated in more languages. That is again something that any one of us can do, and I would be happy to discuss on one-to-one basis what would be required for that. So with that, that is what I had to say. Any further questions or anything, I am open. The repository link is provided over here, so please go and see it.
So just one last question.
Yes, please.
So without integrating this, is there any way this can be shown to my colleagues, the whole functioning and how it has been designed, like accessing the system without
installing it?
No, when I try to log into the website.
No, it won't allow you to log in. Okay, so this is important, huh? We don't allow registrations.
Yeah, that's so. How do I?
Yeah, so if you want to register, if you want a login ID, just let me know. I will create a dummy account for you. Because see, the purpose is very simple. It is just kept with security in mind. If I allow registration, the next day I will see there will be lot of people coming in for spam registration. There are like hundreds and thousands of bots who are basically specifically built for registering on websites like this. And because this is a web application, I don't want that, once you authenticate to a service, you essentially are automatically given a higher privilege. So the registration facility is not there in this system by design. Registration can only be done by a person who is already registered. But if you want to show this to your colleagues, Vishnu, what I can do is that I can create an account for you, which actually allows you to demonstrate all of these things. You had some other question also?
No, just that one.
Okay. So any other questions from anybody else? Otherwise, it's a Sunday. I have taken 1.5 hours of your time, and thank you for all of your time.
So will this presentation will be uploaded to us?
Yes, I have actually live streamed it on YouTube. This is the first time